Good Saturday morning, everyone. Welcome into today's daily Bible reading for April the 22nd. Today we are reading together in Numbers chapter 16, which is going to focus on yet another rebellion against Moses and his leadership, along with Aaron, and that is concerning Korah, and then really how the whole Israelite nation gets involved in this. Again, it just shows the influence and think of the word here, what's it called, contagion that is complaining. It is very contagious. It starts with one person. It goes and can spread very quickly from one person to a small group to a bit larger group to the entire community. And because of the contagion that is complaining and being less than satisfied, we have the issues that are seen here in Numbers chapter 16. So let me get the text of that up on the screen for us so we can read along together here in Numbers 16 today. Number 16 and verse number 1. Now Korah, son of Izhar, son of Kohath, son of Levi, with Dathan and Abiram, sons of Eliab, and On, son of Peleth, sons of Reuben, took 250 prominent Israelite men who were leaders of the community and representatives in the assembly, and they rebelled against Moses. They came together against Moses and Aaron and told them, "You have gone too far. Everyone in the entire community is holy, and Yahweh is among them. Why then do you exalt yourselves above Yahweh's assembly?" When Moses heard this, he fell face down. Then he said to Korah and all his followers, "Tomorrow morning Yahweh will reveal who belongs to him, who is set apart, and the one he will let come near him. He will let the one he chooses come near him. Korah, you and all your followers are to do this. Take fire pans, and tomorrow place fire in them and put incense on them before Yahweh. Then the man Yahweh chooses will be the one who is set apart. It is you, Levites, who have gone too far." Moses also told Korah, "Now listen, Levites. Isn't it enough for you that the God of Israel has separated you from the Israelite community to bring you near to himself, to perform the work at Yahweh's tabernacle, and to stand before the community to minister to them? He has brought you near, and all your fellow Levites who are with you, but you are pursuing the priesthood as well. Therefore, it is you and all your followers who have conspired against Yahweh. As for Aaron, who is he, that you should complain about him?" Moses sent for Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, but they said, "We will not come. Is it not enough that you brought us up from a land flowing with milk and honey to kill us in the wilderness? Do you also have to appoint yourself as ruler over us? Furthermore, you didn't bring us to a land flowing with milk and honey, or give us an inheritance of fields and vineyards. Will you gouge out the eyes of these men? We will not come." Then Moses became angry and said to Yahweh, "Don't respect their offering. I have not taken one donkey from them, nor mistreated a single one of them." So Moses told Korah, "You and all your followers are to appear before Yahweh tomorrow, you, they, and Aaron. Each of you is to take his fire pan, place incense on it, and present his fire pan before Yahweh, 250 fire pans. You and Aaron are each to present your fire pan also." Each man took his fire pan, placed fire in it, put incense on it, and stood at the entrance to the tent of meeting along with Moses and Aaron. After Korah assembled the whole community against them at the entrance to the tent of meeting, the glory of Yahweh appeared to the whole community. Yahweh spoke to Moses and Aaron, "Separate yourselves from this community so that I may consume them instantly." But Moses and Aaron fell face down and said, God who gives breath to all, when one man sins, will you vent your anger on the whole community? Yahweh replied to Moses, "Tell the community, get away from the dwellings of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram." So Moses got up and went to Dathan and Abiram, and the elders of Israel followed him. He warned the community, "Get away from the tents of these wicked men. Don't touch anything that belongs to them, or you will be swept away because of all their sins." So they got away from the dwellings of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. Meanwhile, Dathan and Abiram came out and stood at the entrance to their tents with their wives, children, and infants. Then Moses said, "This is how you will know that Yahweh sent me to do all these things, and that it is not of my own will. If these men die naturally, as all people would, and suffer the fate of all, then Yahweh has not sent me. But if Yahweh brings about something unprecedented, and the ground opens its mouth and swallows them along with all that belongs to them, so that they go down alive into Sheol, then you will know that these men have despised Yahweh." Just as they finished speaking all these words, the ground beneath them split open. The earth opened its mouth and swallowed them and their households, all Korah's people, and all their possessions. They went down alive into Sheol with all that belonged to them. The earth closed over them, and they vanished from the assembly at their cries. All the people of Israel who were around them fled because they thought, "The earth may swallow us too." Fire also came out from Yahweh and consumed the 250 men who were presenting the incense. Then Yahweh spoke to Moses, "Tell Eleazar, son of Aaron, the priest, to remove the fire pans from the burning debris, because they are holy, and scatter the fire far away. As for the fire pans of those who sinned at the cost of their own lives, take them, make them into hammered sheets, as plating for the altar. For they presented them before Yahweh, and the fire pans are holy. They will be a sign to the Israelites." So the priest Eleazar took the bronze fire pans that those who were burned had presented, and they were hammered into plating for the altar, just as Yahweh commanded him through Moses. It was to be a reminder for the Israelites that no unauthorized person outside the lineage of Aaron should approach to offer incense before Yahweh and become like Korah and his followers. The next day, the entire Israelite community complained about Moses and Aaron, saying, "You have killed Yahweh's people." When the community assembled against them, Moses and Aaron turned toward the tent of meeting, and suddenly the cloud covered it, and Yahweh's glory appeared. Moses and Aaron went to the front of the tent of meeting, and Yahweh said to Moses, "Get away from this community so that I may consume them instantly." But they fell face down. Then Moses told Aaron, "Take your fire pan and place fire from the altar in it and add incense. Go quickly to the community and make atonement for them, because wrath has come from Yahweh. The plague has begun." So Aaron took his fire pan as Moses had ordered, ran into the middle of the assembly, and saw that the plague had begun among the people. After he added incense, he made atonement for the people. He stood between the dead and the living, and the plague was halted. But those who died from the plague numbered 14,700, in addition to those who died because of the Korah incidents. Aaron then returned to Moses at the entrance to the tent of meeting, since the plague had been halted. And that is Numbers chapter 16. A lot going on here within this chapter. It begins, of course, with those who incited this rebellion. These were, at least from the Levite perspective, these were those belonging to the family of Korah. He was a Kohathite, meaning he was one of the ones who carried the most holy objects of the tabernacle from place to place. That was their responsibility. And it's interesting, I'll go and throw this out here now just to remind us that one of the issues concerning, or part of the instructions concerning the Kohathites, is they were not allowed to let that tribe die out because of their important position. So from their perspective, the issue was a religious one. Who would get to serve as the priest? Who could be holy before the Lord? Who could perform these various activities? But also we have Dathan and Abiram, who are from Reuben. And it makes sense that they might be engaged in this as well, because as those belonging to the firstborn son of Jacob, they might feel as if they have the ability to lead. Although we know Reuben and Simeon were both cut off from leadership because of their transgressions and poor decision making, and Judah ends up being the prominent son in various ways, and eventually the Messiah is going to come through Judah. So from both these perspectives, we have men, some from Levi, some from Reuben, who are coming and challenging Moses. They rebelled against Moses. Not only them, but 250. The text says they were prominent men, they were leaders, they were representatives. So this was not just some random puny rebellion. This was serious. These were men who had great influence among the people. The issue isn't the entire community holy? And Yahweh's among them. Why then do you exalt yourselves above Yahweh's assembly? There is envy, there is resentment, there are accusations here of pride and lording. But there's actually some truth. There's some truth in what they say. Yes, everyone in the entire community is holy. They are to be a holy nation, a kingdom of priests, as we read back in Exodus chapter 19. And yet, they're using this truth to make a play for greater power. So Moses initially, after he hears this, he falls face down. Again, this is ironic, as we saw in the last story back in chapter 14, I believe it was, where they fall down before the people. And this falling down is a sign of mourning over the dead. And here's the ironic portion of it. These are soon going to be dead people who make this rebellion. But he says, let's just make a test. Let's test to see who actually belongs to Yahweh. We'll take some fire. We'll take some fire pans. We'll take some incense. We'll offer that up, and we'll see who Yahweh chooses to be his people. Beginning of verse number 8. Moses challenges those who have stepped up with Korah. He said, aren't you content with the reality that you as Levites get to be God's mediators? You are the ones who get to approach God and his presence in a way that none of the rest of the Israelites do. Shouldn't you be content with that? But you're not content with that, for you're making a play for the high priestlyship or high priesthood. That's what's going on here. Why does Aaron and his descendants get to be the high priest? We want to do that as well. Beginning of verse number 12, he calls for Dathan and Abiram, again, these Reubenites who are caught up in this as well, who are part of the issue here. And they start blaming Moses for all the issues. Moses, didn't you bring us up from a land flowing with milk and honey, and then just to die in the wilderness? And weren't you supposed to take us to a land flowing with milk and honey? And yet you couldn't get us there either. So now Egypt is seen as a land flowing with milk and honey. So you brought us from that to die in the wilderness. And you were supposed to take us to a land filled with milk and honey, and you failed to get us there too. But as I recall, it wasn't Moses who failed. It was their own brothers, the scouts and the nation themselves who got caught up in their pessimism and ended up falling short of stepping into the promised land while they were there at the doorstep. So they're blaming Moses. It's not Moses' fault. And yet we can't blame Moses. He's angry in verse 15. He said, and he speaks basically an imprecatory request to Yahweh. Reminds us of the imprecatory Psalms where he calls for God's judgment. That's what he's calling for. He is calling for God's judgment here. Don't respect their offering, because I have done nothing wrong. I haven't taken a single donkey. I haven't mistreated anybody. I've only done what I'm supposed to do. So Korah, let's go to this test. Let's see who Yahweh accepts. So we have then in this test, we're going to have 250 plates of incense that are going to be offered up on their side, and then the one offered up on the side of Moses, if I'm reading that correctly. So they stand before, they gather at the entrance, and the text tells us that Yahweh speaks to, actually the glory of Yahweh appears to the whole community, and he speaks to Moses there, and he looks at them. He says, hey, you need to get away from all these people, because I'm going to consume them. I'm going to destroy all these individuals. And yet Moses and Aaron again fall face down, and they intercede for the people. God who gives breath to all, when one man sins, will you vent your wrath on the whole community? They intercede for the nation. Take out those who are leading this, but spare the nation as a whole. So he says, all right, the Lord speaks to Moses. He always speaks to Moses. Tell the community, get away from the dwellings of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. Get away from everything what they possess. Don't touch anything. And then these individuals step up. And when they step up, Moses says in verse 28, this is how you will know that Yahweh sent me to do all these things, and that it is not of my will. If these men, he's looking at the community, and he tells them to consider these men. If these men who have incited this rebellion, if they die of natural deaths, then you should know that Yahweh's not with me. But if something unprecedented happens, if something crazy happens, then you'll know that God is with me. And it's so interesting that exactly what Moses says here comes to pass. The ground does open up and swallows, very, very unfortunately for the families of these individuals. I don't know if they're supporting these men in this or what, but everybody swallowed up, all three of these men, their wives, their children, even their infants. How sad that is, but this just shows the absolute necessity of ridding sin from the camp. You can't have it. Again, this is contagious. Just like we saw in chapters 12 and 13, it began on the outskirts, it worked its way into the people, even eventually working its way into the innermost circle with Aaron and Miriam. This rebellion is contagious and it has to be dealt with. And that's exactly what happens. Again, interesting and ironic twist. They said the rebels in Genesis 14, or excuse me, the rebels in Numbers 14 who didn't want to enter the promised land in 13 and 14, those rebels, they said the land devours its inhabitants. And here the land literally devours the inhabitants. Once this happens, the people freak out and they run away, and then fire comes and consumes those who were presenting the incense, an echo from the Nadab and Abihu story, most certainly. Well, then Yahweh speaks to Moses again, beginning in verse number 36. Tell Eleazar to take care of these things. You're going to take those pans, you're going to hammer them out and put them over the altar as bronze coverings for them. So Eleazar does this. And part of it is that this is going to be a reminder that whenever you offer the incense, the only people that should be offering the incense are those belonging to Aaron, no one else. So if you see this and you're not belonging to Aaron, know that there is something bad that's probably going to happen to you very, very quickly. It's a reminder of what took place concerning Korah and his rebellion. Well, unfortunately, the next day, verse 41, we know the chronology here is very clear. The very next day, the entire community rises up against Moses and Aaron and complains, says, "You've killed Yahweh's people." But here comes Yahweh defending his leaders once again. And he tells them basically the same thing, that you need to get away from this community so I may consume them instantly. Almost the exact same thing that is said in verse 21. But again, Moses and Aaron intercede for the people. And this shows that the accusation that Korah had towards Moses and Aaron, that they were prideful, they were arrogant, they were lording, all of this is so wrong, because what we see here within this text is their humility. It is their humility, and it is their willingness to love the people and to speak up for the people. We see that here within the text. The very accusations that they made are proven to be wrong. Look at them continuing to beg God's mercy upon the people. Well, God's still going to follow through in this instance. He sends a plague against them. We're not exactly sure what type of plague it is, but it's killing people pretty quickly. So Moses tells Aaron to grab your fire pan quickly, go to the altar, and go make atonement for the people. So Aaron took his fire pan in verse 47, as Moses had ordered, ran toward the middle of the assembly, and saw that the plague had begun among the people. After he had incense, he made atonement for the people. Notice this. He stood between the dead and the living. He stood between the dead and the living, and the plague was halted. But you know what? 14,700 people died, already thinning the herd of those rebels who would not enter into the promised land. Again, all of these horrible events of death and judgment, they all come because of rebellion. They all come as a result of these individuals not following the dictates of Yahweh, but doing things on their own, wanting to follow their own desires, and it only leads to devastation and severe consequence. So may that be a lesson for us. And of course, this is supposed to be a story that does stick with the Bible reader, because we get to the book of Jude, the short little book and letter of Jude in the New Testament, and who is mentioned along with Cain and Balaam, Korah and his rebellion. So may this story, this unfortunate story, may it remind us of the necessity of knowing our place, embracing humility, and being appreciative for the blessings that God has given us, and not being like going to the beginning, going back to the garden. You'll be like God. There's so much more for you to have. Adam and Eve were not content, and it led to their downfall. And friends, very easily, that could be our downfall as well. Not being content, not being appreciative for what God has given us. May we learn those lessons from this text here in Numbers chapter 16. I appreciate so much you tuning into this reading on this Saturday. Hope you have a great rest of your Saturday, and we'll be back at it tomorrow, reading a double chapter, reading 17 and 18. 17 is pretty short, and 18 is concerning the priesthood as well. So we'll be talking about that tomorrow on Sunday the 23rd. Looking forward to being with everyone for our Bible studies and worship assembly as well. Again, have a great rest of your Saturday, everyone. Take care, and God bless.